The War of 1812. January 1815. The war thus far. Britain and America may have signed a peace treaty at Ghent on Christmas Eve 1814, but until it's ratified by both governments, the war continues. And Britain still has its eyes on New Orleans. But on January the 8th, they suffered defeat in the Battle of New Orleans, a military disaster in the history of a country which has no shortage of them. That's not meant as a wisecrack, but as a statement of fact. Just think of the Charge of the Light Brigade, or Dunkirk, or Singapore. I will cover the Battle of New Orleans in a separate video, but for right now, here's what else happened in the War of 1812 in January 1815. Lots. Today's video is based on the entries for January 1815 in D.R. Westhouse's unpublished The War of 1812, a chronology of the military actions 1812 to 1815, but as always, all mistakes are strictly my own. British commander Sir Edward Pakenham had initially wanted to withdraw his troops from their position facing Jackson's men who were dug in along the Rodriguez Canal. He feared his troops would be decimated in a frontal assault on the strong American defenses, which is exactly what happened. Pakenham wanted to withdraw in order to find a better avenue for attacking New Orleans, but British Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane strongly disagreed, and Pakenham was left to make the best of a bad situation. On New Year's Day, both sides fight a 3-hour artillery duel, the British having manhandled 14 big guns from the fleet on Lake Borgne to positions in front of the American defenses. Pakenham hoped to make breaches in the American lines. But alas, British fire was largely ineffective, while the Americans were able to destroy or damage the 6 British batteries. By the time Pakenham decides to call it a day, the Redcoats have lost 26 dead and 40 wounded, while the Yanks suffered 11 killed and 23 hurt. The stage is then set for the big battle on January the 8th. But on January the 9th, with bodies still lying on the New Orleans battlefield, the British attacked Fort St. Philip, which guarded the Mississippi approach to New Orleans, 60 miles below the city. 5 British ships, a brig, a sloop, a schooner, and 2 bomb vessels, bombarded the fort until January 18th, but it was newly reinforced, and they only managed to kill 1 American while wounding 7 others. So they gave up and sailed away. But do Britons ever really give up? On January the 10th, they invade Georgia, with 1,500 men landing on Cumberland Island. On the 13th, the energetic Captain Robert Barry will lead an attack on the fort at Point Petre, destroying it and capturing its guns. On January 14th, they attack St. Mary's, Georgia, capturing both ships and stores and, inevitably, burning public buildings. Then on the 15th, the flamboyant George Cockburn arrives to take overall command. The British will consider attacking Savannah or linking up with Marines on the Apalachicola. The Apalachicola River in Spanish Florida, while slaves and Native Americans are encouraged to defect to the British at Cumberland Island. Action now shifts north to Staten Island, New York, where the USS President has been prevented from leaving for the West Indies by a British naval blockade. On January the 13th, the British ships are scattered by a serious snowstorm, and the President makes a run for it, only to ground on a sandbar. After 2 hours, President manages to work free, but is damaged and can only sail at reduced speed. Pursued by 4 British warships, President slugs it out with HMS Endymion, and when Pomone and Tendros join the fray, the American commander, Stephen Decatur, has no choice but to surrender early on January 15th. The Americans have endured 24 killed and 55 wounded, the British 11 dead and 14 hurt, all on Endymion. As for the President, it is taken into Royal Navy service as HMS President, His Majesty's ship President. Talk about adding insult to injury, wow. Yet, all is not quiet on the New Orleans front, as a small group of locals decide to have some fun harassing the British as they withdraw via Lake Borgne. On January 20th, they succeed in capturing an unarmed barge, along with 54 soldiers and sailors, an officer, and a master's mate. Then, on the 22nd, they captured a schooner, a transport, and 3 other vessels, burning the schooner when it is unable to cross a sandbar. These raids so annoy the British that they begin providing their retreating vessels with armed escorts, the withdrawal completed by January 27th. The British had begun evacuating New Orleans on January the 18th, Andrew Jackson sending a small force of dragoons under Major Thomas Hines to shadow them. On the 25th, these troops will skirmish with British soldiers at the Bayou Bienvenue. The Bayou Bienvenue, a minor clash that will be the last battle of the New Orleans campaign. Louisiana men under Major Pierre Lacoste will also approach the British position, but choose discretion over valor and withdraw. But they do manage to capture some stragglers and some escaped slaves. Finally, January 1815 ends in South Carolina. On January the 30th, HMS Hebrus sends a small party to St. John's Island near the mouth of the North Edisto River in order to collect water. American militia land on the island to drive them off, while 3 barges and 75 men under Lieutenant Lawrence Kearney go to cut off their retreat. The Hebrus spots the barges and opens fire, while signaling for her own boats to return, but the Yanks manage to capture the tender, or supply ship, after a fight lasting 1.5 hours. 2 of the 3 British boats make it back to Hebrus, but the third, containing a carronade, 6 brass swivels, pistols, and muskets, is found beached and abandoned. In the end, the Americans take around 40 prisoners. Prisoners, eh? Well, that's one way to emigrate to America. Thus, January 1815 sees continued fighting and perhaps the greatest battle of the entire conflict, even though the War of 1812 is supposed to be over. What will February bring? Peace? Not bloody likely. If this is your first visit to 1812 channel, my name is Warren, and I'm your host. I'm not a historian, nor am I an expert on the War of 1812. Instead, I'm a student wishing to learn about the conflict. Each month for the roughly 3 years of the war, I will outline the major events. I will also try to review a book on the war. Did I miss anything? Any errors? Then let me know in the comments below. When the barrage lifts, cheers. The music used in today's video is my go-to, Crusade by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod, while the pictures were courtesy of Pix Here, PX Here. I know, toy soldiers. Maybe not the most appropriate, but how can I resist toy soldiers?